The Houston Rockets faced the Atlanta Hawks in the NBA season opener for both squads, with the Rockets coming in as the underdog with a plus 350 money line, and the Hawks coming in as the favorites with a minus 450 money line. It's easy to think that the Rockets have no chance of winning this game, especially if you think back to last year's game where the Rockets lost the game to the Hawks 130 to 114 in a game where Jalen Green dropped 41 points on the Hawks defense. Now, that game was a little bit closer than people thought, and with some of the adjustments and the players that the Rockets have, here's how I think they can beat the Hawks this year. Before we get into that, if you haven't already, make sure you hit like on this video and subscribe to the Houston Rockets Chop Shop. This is your one-stop shop for in-depth analysis, breakdowns, highlights, podcasts. We do it all here at the Houston Rockets Chop Shop. Continue to support our channel and hit the subscribe button. Also, this video is sponsored by BetUS.com. BetUS is one of the best online sportsbooks in the world. Their online sportsbook provides all the sports betting tips and highlights you need as a bettor, in addition to the safe and secure place for you to wager on your favorite teams and sporting events, including the Rockets. BetUS.com right now, if you sign up, you get a 125% sign-on bonus. That means if you drop $100, they're going to match that with $125. That is BetUS.com. BetUS.com. Get in the game now. So, how can the Rockets beat the Atlanta Hawks? This is a game that's going to be tough for the Rockets because coming into this season, the Hawks were able to upgrade their roster with the addition of Dejounte Murray. Now, Dejounte Murray has been known to cause serious troubles for the Houston Rockets in the past. He is an on-ball defender. He is a nightmare going downhill and attacking our bigs, and he is a guy that could rebound and assist and do everything on the court. You pair that up with Trae Young, a guy who is one of the best pick and roll guards in the league, and it spells trouble for the Rockets. I'm not going to lie, this is going to be a hard game for our team. But after watching the film from last season, there's some things that I kind of picked up that I think the Rockets can do to improve their odds in this game. One of the plans that the Rockets tried to implement last year was trapping Trae Young on the pick and rolls. Trae Young is a devastating pick and roll player, and a team like us that runs a drop, and we've talked about the drop several times, our bigs, when they're not switching, they run a drop coverage. Trae Young is literally one of the worst players to run a drop against because not only can he shoot from a ridiculously far distance, he's also able to get downhill on your bigs and change direction on them, which leaves them helpless. And if you try to help out on Trae Young, he leaves your defense scrambling and is able to kick it out with his magical passes to a bunch of shooters around him. So Trae Young is really a nightmare matchup for us on our team this year. So last year, the coaching staff elected to trap him when he got screen set on by, whether it was a big, whether they were using Gallinari for him, but that trap failed horribly, because as soon as they trapped him, he would either dish it off to the whoever the person was, and mostly a lot of it was with Gallinari or Capella, and they would go into a short roll action where they were able to whip it around to other players that were able to hit open threes. We really did not execute that very well. They also try to do a hard show with Sengun, and a hard show is almost a semi-trap, right? You can hard show, it's where you meet the ball handler at the level of where the screen is being set. So once whoever the person was setting the screen for Trae Young set their screen, Sengun would come up to the level of Trae Young and put his hands up to kind of divert any type of driving or shooting that Trae Young may want to do. The only problem was that Sengun was too slow getting back into boxing out or even taking care of the big that was rolling. So one of the things about a hard show, it's a really hard defense to do with a non-athletic big. You kind of want to do with somebody that has good foot speed, that can show on the ball handler and then sprint or backpedal back to their assignment, which is the big that's rolling. And we got burnt a lot on that action with Clint Capella getting wide open dunks and just, a lot of chaos just being caused by the other teammates trying to compensate for the lack of coverage on that roll man. So I hope that they don't try that again this year, because I don't think that the results are going to be anything different. So that was one of the things that we got destroyed on. Obviously, we talked about the drop coverage. We saw what happened with our team in Miami when they did a lot of dribble handoffs. you were able to see that they were the Heat shooters were able to take advantage of our bigs that were sagging off of them and just come off shooting. With Trae Young, that's a green light for him. He can shoot it from 30 feet. He's a logo guy just like Dame and Steph. So he's one of those guys you have to pick up on him. So what can the Rockets do this year that's a little bit different in order for them to have some success against the Hawks when they run those actions? Additionally, you also want to think about who they have on the other side of that backcourt with him now, with Dejounte Murray. Dejounte Murray offers a different type of issue for our team to guard because he is a slasher. And same thing when you're in the drop, you really give up a lot of those open mid-range shots to those guys that are slashers or guys that aren't comfortable shooting the three. If they're athletic and fast enough, they can still beat you by getting downhill, changing direction, stopping on a dime in the mid-range, or just forcing you into foul trouble. And Dejounte Murray is one of the best finishers for the guard position in the NBA. He is a wizard around the basket. And I can see that definitely being an issue. Now they have this two-headed backcourt that's going to be kind of just attacking the weak link on the defense, which sadly will be our centers, both Bruno and Sengun, for different reasons. So I think, the Rockets have to have a different game plan than trying to trap their ball handlers, because they have enough shooting around them to be able to make us pay for that. With Hunter and these guys they have now, I think the best bet for the team is to play whoever the personnel is. And what I mean by that is if you're playing Dejounte Murray on the screen, then you can play your drop coverage on him because he's not a shooter. The team just has to be very disciplined in keeping their pick and roll defensive defensive principles in place, whether that's tagging, stunning, recovering, rotating. They have to be able to rotate crisply to their assignments. And that was one thing that we suffered on last year. I had a lot of poor effort from a lot of guys. Additionally, other things that we could do is not play the drop the whole game, right? So this will tell me a lot about the team this year. If the Rockets are really serious about winning, they will play a small ball lineup at some point during this game. Let me say that again. If they're serious about winning, they will play a small ball lineup at some point during this game. Conventional wisdom would say against a team like that, you can still play your drop coverage because they don't have cold shooters everywhere, right? Mainly Trae Young. But the goal is when it comes down to winning time, you want the guy that's going to be on the court, or the five guys that are going to be on the court are guys that could guard 1 through 5. And that looks to me like maybe Jabari getting some burn at the 5, right? And this is a team that you can really get away with that against because Clint Capella is not a post present. Clint Capella is not a bruiser. Now, we may get killed on the boards, but I think they can make up for that by rebounding by committee. But this is a game where you can actually try to match up Clint and Jabari and force Clint, even on the defensive end, for him to come out of the paint and have to guard Jabari on the perimeter. And then when they're on offense, if they try to run screens with either Murray or Young, you can switch 1 through 5. Now, I don't know if the Rockets are going to do this. I don't know if they're ready to make these kind of schematic changes this early in the season. Usually when the season starts, teams really try to do the most generic and baseline things that their guys are comfortable with. And I haven't seen them do a lot of Jabari at the 5, if any, during the preseason. I think they probably would have if he hadn't gotten hurt, especially in that game against Miami. So I'll be curious to see what defense they implement. I think the best defense would be that. If they're going to run a drop the whole game, I can foresee a lot of chaos ensuing, similar to that Miami game. I think the guys are still young and still undisciplined enough not to be able to execute that coverage against a team that has Trae Young. Trae Young is a wizard with the ball. He can manipulate. Even when you trap him, he can still manipulate the game when you trap him because he knows where his spots are. He knows how to get guys to where he wants to go. He knows where to set up, so when the trap comes, he has the advantage with his teammates, especially when he gets set up in the corners. Y'all hear me talk about Jalen's empty corner when he gets screens and goes into the empty corner. Now, if a team is trapping you, you kind of want to force them into the empty corner because the roll man then has nobody able to account for them. And if they're a decent passer or some sort of athlete, then that creates a lot of stress on the defense. So look out for that. They may mix it up, They played a little zone in that game as well, and that kind of helped, but it didn't really do much because the guys didn't really follow their zone principles either. So, it's really hard to say what will happen. Now, one thing that's different, obviously, we have Jabari Smith, we have Tari Eason on this team. Jalen and KPJ are better defenders this year. You would hope that some of the mistakes that they were making last season aren't going to be the same mistakes. But the team is different. I mean, Garrison Matthews played a lot of high minutes in that game, and he was getting cooked per usual. Sengun was getting cooked per usual. Josh Christopher was playing a lot of high minutes in that game, and he didn't play very well. Right, those were probably one of the 3 worst plus minuses in that game. In the game where Jalen Green scored 41 points, and we lost by 16 points. Jalen was a 0. I mean, he wasn't a negative. He actually was a positive in the game where you lose 16. That means when he was on the court, we weren't losing, right? So that tells you that there is a chance there. If you mitigate some of those players and some of those errors and some of those kind of boneheaded things that some of those guys would do, and Garrison had a pretty good game, that game on offense. He was shooting well, but he just wasn't doing much on defense. He was getting abused by Trae Young. So if you kind of take that out, let's replace Garrison Matthews' minutes with Tari Eason and KJ's and Tate's. Let's replace some of the minutes that Jay Gupp played with Eric Gordon, who sat out that game. Let's replace, some of the Sengun at the 5 and Garuba at the 5 minutes with some Jabari at the 5, and I think you have a totally different ball game. And this brings us to the next segment, which is offense. So on offense, a lot of the issues that we had against the Hawks, they have against us. And I think it's going to be more pronounced this year because our players are better and we have better fitting players, right? Like I said before, instead of KJ getting a lot of those kickout threes, it's going to be going to Jabari Smith Jr., a guy that's shooting northwards of 48% on catch and shoot threes, right? And instead of, Jalen, a 173-pound kid trying to guard, it's going to be this 180 plus Jalen, right? That's giving max effort on defense. It's going to be KPJ that seems like he's more focused this year. And for us, their team has to stop our guards. Now, Dejounte Murray is a pretty good defender, and he has to pick. I can see them putting him on Jalen, or maybe Hunter on Jalen, but they can't stop everybody, right? With Jalen's improved passing, his ability to get downhill and absorb contact, I mean, he dropped 41 on them because they run a drop coverage. And all the stuff I said about Sengun, it applies to Clint Capella as well, right? Clint Capella cannot play the drop against Jalen Green because he might have 40 again. You cannot play a drop against a guy that's shooting northwards of 40% from 3 because he's going to just shoot those shots in your face, and you have to come up and guard him. And I don't know if they're going to make that adjustment this year. I think it's going to be based on how close the game is. But if they do that drop coverage on Jalen Green, he will destroy them. He will destroy them. And you can see him to have a very efficient game against them. He was getting whatever he wanted. He was getting downhill. He was getting to the basket at will. He was getting to his mid-range. He was shooting his threes. Teams that play the drop on Jalen Green are going to suffer for it. And this is the type of athlete that you have. If you know the names I mentioned that are players that destroy drop coverages, you hear me talk about Steph Curry's. You hear me talk about the Trae Youngs of the world. You hear me talk about Dame. You hear me talk about all these guys that are cold shooters that can, do all these things. But now I'm throwing the name Jalen Green into that mix because he is a guy that's a drop killer. You cannot play the drop on him. Then he has the additional benefit of having the mixture of Trae Young's ability to shoot from depth and also the, Dejounte Murray slashing ability, just more explosive. So for them, they're going to have to stop him. The key this year, though, the reason that 41 points just didn't hit as much as it did last year was that Jalen was missing a lot of reads. He scored good, but the game was a little bit harder than it needed to be. For him and Kevin Porter in this game, the ability for the team to win is going to look like that Spurs game, right? Not a game where they both drop 40 and we lose, but a game where they can be efficient in distributing the ball and using their teammates as weapons. That's the next step for winning. Defense and playing smart on offense. Dropping 40 and 50 is nice, but winning is better. So I want to see them use the pressure they provide on the Hawks defense to be able to distribute and cause chaos when the defense collapses. Kick it out to your shooters and get it open for them. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. I'm going to be looking to see how Jabari looks. In his first NBA game, is he going to look like Jabari from the summer league, or is he going to look like Jabari that we saw in the preseason? Is he going to be the guy that's going to be shooting 45% from three, or is he going to be the guy that's kind of having some hesitancy with his shot? That's going to be big. Sengun, this is going to be a big game for him because this is a team that he doesn't do well against. If you look at his numbers, he really suffered against Clint Capella because Capella is athletic, and Capella was able to outrun him. A lot of the easy buckets that Capella got were just beating Sengun down the court. And this is something we saw Capella do against Nikola Jokic when the Harden era was still around. There are certain players and certain style of players that are just bad matchups for guys that aren't uber athletic. Capella can just sprint up and down the court and beat Sengun down the court every play, and he's going to get about 8 to 10 points just by doing that. So I really want to see where his conditioning is and whether he's able to run. Then we're going to see if Coach Silas is able to make any adjustments for that. But that's going to be a tough matchup for him. I want to see how he reacts to it as the starter this year. For the other guys, I think that they're going to step up and play the way they do. For the coaching staff, I'm going to see if Coach Silas is going to make some of the bad decisions he made with the lineups last year. A lot of games that were close last year were lost because of our lineups and some of the choices of players he put out there for whatever reason. So I don't know if it was part of the tanking protocol or him just not being somebody that's great at putting the best five on the court or maximizing his lineups, whether it's the first team, second team, or third team. So we'll see how that looks this year, whether he's made improvements in that. Overall, I think the Hawks should be the favorite for this game, but I would still put a little bit of money on the Rockets, right? Because I think they have a chance to beat this team. It's just going to come down to whether they can get stops, because the scoring is going to be there. If they can get stops, if they can figure out a way to contain Trae Young, you can't stop Trae Young. If you can make him work and make his teammates have to take contested jumpers, then we're going to have a chance in this game. Let me know what y'all think. Do you think the Rockets can win this game, or do you think the Hawks are too much of a matchup nightmare for us to overcome? And remember, keep supporting the Houston Rockets Chop Shop as we put out this great hoops content.